Tonight, step into a world that smelled of wood smoke, damp wool, and choices you would never make on purpose. A world where a hot bath could get you killed. Where sleeping flat meant you were asking for trouble. And where the air itself was your enemy. This is the Tudor era. Henry VIII is on the throne. And the average person, they're just trying to survive until dinner. But here's the strange part. Their weirdest habits, the ones that make you cringe today, actually made perfect sense. Because in their world, logic worked differently. So before we go back in time, take a moment. Like this video if you're curious about history. Subscribe to Little Historical, because you won't want to miss what comes next. And let me ask you something. Would you trade your morning shower for a linen shirt? Would you drink beer instead of water? Would you sleep sitting up, just to feel safe? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might realize, we're not so different from them. Just better deodorant. You wake up, and the first thought that crosses your mind is not breakfast, not work, not even prayer. It is water, but not the kind you reach for today. In Tudor England, a bath is not a luxury. It is a risk assessment, the kind where you sit on the edge of a wooden tub and ask yourself a question that should never be reasonable. Do I want to be slightly cleaner, or do I want to continue being alive? Because from the moment you were old enough to understand danger, you were taught that disease does not come from germs. No one has ever seen a germ. Disease comes from bad air, invisible vapors that drift through the world like hungry ghosts, searching for an open door. And your skin, especially when warmed by hot water, is nothing but a series of open doors. You have been told, again and again, that heat opens the pores of your body. Once those pores are open, the bad air slips right in. It settles in your lungs, your blood, your very spirit. So a bath is not relaxing. A bath is an invitation. You sit there, steam rising, and you think about every sickness you have ever seen, every fever that took a neighbor, every cough that never stopped. And you decide, quietly, that smelling like yourself is far better than smelling like a corpse. But here is where the tension deepens, where the air in the room seems to hold its breath. Because you are not alone in this fear. Everyone around you feels the same. Your husband, your wife, the servants who share your hall, they all avoid the bath. And yet, you all notice each other. You notice the sweat, the stale wool, the unwashed linen. You notice, and you say nothing. Because to speak of it would be to admit something uncomfortable, that you are all walking a fine line between survival and repulsion. There is a strange intimacy in this shared avoidance. You know each other's smells. You know each other's bodies in ways that modern people never will. And in the darkness of a Tudor bedchamber, when the candles are out and the only sound is breathing, that closeness becomes something else. Something unspoken. Something that lingers in the space between two people who have not bathed in weeks, yet still reach for each other in the night. It is not dirty. It is human. And it is held together by a single, fragile belief, that keeping your pores closed might just keep you alive until morning. But of course, you cannot stay completely filthy. So you have a secret, a quiet workaround that changes everything. And that secret begins with linen, not water. Which brings us to the next strange habit that made perfect sense in the Tudor era. That secret, the one about linen instead of water, is only part of the story. Because once you have dressed yourself in clean fabric and sealed your pores against the deadly night air, you still have to face the darkness. And the darkness in Tudor England is not empty. It is alive with possibility, with fear, and with a rhythm that modern people have completely forgotten. When the sun sets and the candles burn low, you do not simply lie down and wait for morning. No, that would be far too simple. Instead, you enter the first sleep. Around 9 o'clock, you climb into your bed, propped up on pillows because lying flat still feels too much like death. You close your eyes. The house settles. The fire crackles. And for about 4 hours, you drift through dreams that you will barely remember. Then, without alarm, without warning, you wake. It is 1 in the morning. The world outside is absolutely black. And instead of rolling over and begging for more rest, you rise. This is the hour that belongs only to you and the ones who share your bed. The wakeful hours, they call it. 2 hours of darkness when the boundaries between sleep and waking blur into something almost sacred. And what do you do in these hours? You pray, yes, because the church teaches that midnight is when God listens closest. But you also do other things. Things that require privacy. Things that require the cover of darkness and the stillness of a sleeping household. You talk to your partner in low voices, words that would never be spoken in daylight. You reach for each other in the dark, not out of duty, but out of a quiet desperation that only the small hours can justify. The Tudors believed, with absolute certainty, that children conceived during the wakeful hours were stronger, luckier, more blessed. So there is a purpose beneath the pleasure, a calculation hidden inside the intimacy. But even without that belief, the hour itself creates something undeniable. You are neither fully asleep nor fully awake. Your defenses are lowered. Your honesty rises. And in the arms of someone who has not bathed in weeks, who smells of wood smoke and sleep and the strange comfort of familiarity, you find a kind of closeness that daylight would never allow. Then, around 3 a.m, you lie back down. You close your eyes again. The second sleep takes you until dawn. And when you wake, you barely remember the hour between. But your body remembers. Your dreams remember. And that secret rhythm, that midnight waking, becomes the most intimate habit no one ever speaks of. Of course, not every Tudor habit happens behind closed doors. Some of them walk with you, carried in your hand, pressed to your nose, as you step into streets that smell like everything you are trying to avoid. Which brings us to the next strange habit that made perfect sense in the Tudor era. You step outside your door, and the world hits you. Not with noise, not with colour, but with smell. The streets of Tudor London are a slow-moving experiment in everything your nose never wanted to learn. Animal waste, rotting vegetables, the sour tang of old sweat and something else, something you cannot name but can certainly feel. And mixed into all of it, the metallic whisper of blood from the butcher's stall and the faint, sickly sweetness of sickness itself. You have no choice but to walk through it. But you do not walk unprotected. Around your neck, or tucked into your belt, or held loosely in your hand, is a small container. A pomander. Inside it, a collection of herbs and spices chosen with care. Rosemary for strength, lavender for calm, cloves for their sharp, almost painful brightness. And sometimes, if you can afford it, ambergris, that strange substance that comes from the sea and carries a warmth that seems to breathe on its own. You lift the pomander to your nose, and for a moment, the world shrinks. The street disappears. The filth, the noise, the danger, all of it replaced by a single, deliberate scent. You breathe in deeply, and you feel safe. Not because the herbs actually protect you, but because the action itself, the ritual of it, convinces your body that you have done something. And in a world where most dangers are invisible, that feeling is everything. But here is where the tension becomes something more intimate. Because scent, in Tudor England, is not just about survival. It is about attraction. It is about power. It is about the quiet, unspoken language that passes between two people when they stand close enough to share air. A woman walks past you in the market, and you catch not her body but her pomander. The rosemary and musk she carries tells you more about her than her dress ever could. You lean in, just slightly, without thinking. She notices. She lifts her pomander again, slowly, deliberately, as if to say, I know you are watching. And you are. In a world where bodies are rarely washed and linen only hides so much, the right scent becomes a kind of invitation. A secret whispered through the nose. A promise made without a single word. You find yourself following her, not with your feet but with your breath. And when she turns and looks at you, her pomander still raised, you realize that the line between protection and seduction has blurred into nothing. You are not smelling herbs anymore. You are smelling possibility. And that possibility, carried in a small gold container, might be the most dangerous thing in the street. But danger, of course, comes in many forms. Some of them you drink. Which brings us to the next strange habit that made perfect sense in the Tudor era. You have survived the streets with your pomander pressed to your nose. You have navigated the smells, the dangers, the quiet invitations carried on rosemary and musk. But now your throat is dry. Your mouth feels like old linen. And you need to drink something. You look at the water bucket in the corner of the room, and something stops you. That water came from the river. The same river where the tanners soak their hides, where the butchers dump their waste, where your neighbor's wash water and your other neighbor's chamber pot eventually find their way. You have seen the river. You have smelled it. And the idea of drinking it, of letting that cold, clear-looking death pass through your lips, makes your stomach turn not with disgust but with genuine fear. Because you know, without knowing why, that river water makes people sick. Not everyone, not every time, but often enough that you have learned to avoid it. So instead, you reach for the ale. Not the strong ale that leaves men stumbling and confessing secrets they should keep. No, you reach for small beer, weak, pale, barely alcoholic, brewed in your own kitchen or bought from the woman down the lane who has never poisoned anyone on purpose. You drink it with breakfast. You drink it with dinner. You drink it in the afternoon when the sun sits heavy and the work never ends. Children drink it. Servants drink it. The old woman who lives alone and speaks to no one, she drinks it too. It is not about celebration. It is about survival. But here, in the quiet of the evening, when the small beer has loosened your tongue just enough, something shifts. You sit across from someone, a guest, a neighbor, perhaps the same woman whose pomander you followed through the market. You raise your cup. She raises hers. And in the space between sips, the alcohol does its slow, invisible work. Not enough to make you foolish. Just enough to soften the edges. Enough that her hand lingers near yours on the table. Enough that your eyes meet for a breath longer than usual. Enough that when she laughs at something you said, you feel it in your chest, not your ears. The small beer has not made you drunk, but it has made you brave. And bravery, in the Tudor era, is the rarest currency of all. You take another drink. She watches your throat move. And neither of you mentions the water bucket again. By the time the cup is empty, the room feels warmer, the shadows deeper, and the distance between you smaller than it was. You do not know why the beer keeps you safe from sickness. You only know that it does. And tonight, it might keep you safe from something else entirely. The fear of speaking first. The fear of reaching out. The fear of wanting what you should not want. That, perhaps, is the real reason you never drink water. Not because it might kill your body, but because it would leave your heart completely sober. And some habits, strange as they seem, are not really about survival at all. They are about everything else that makes life worth surviving.